When my dad first told me that he started 7th grade at the age of 15, I didn't realize what was wrong. Now that I am digging deeper into his story, I realize the discrepancy between my age in 7th grade and his age. I've realized that the discrepancy must have come from the 10-year ban on education and schooling during China's Cultural Revolution. Wang Yu was born on December 2nd, 1969, into the Cultural Revolution of China, a time when intellectuals were being publicly shamed and China was closed off from the rest of the world. A time when Mao Zedong reigned supreme and bourgeois people were sent to farmlands for re-education. As Wang Yu did not come from a bourgeois family, his family was spared from the torture. In fact, when he was young and didn't understand the gravity of the situation, Wang Yu would participate in the public shaming of intellectuals. When he was very young, he was sent to live with his grandparents, relieving his parents' responsibility of raising a child, and helped relieve some financial stress. During this time, at the age of 4, he started remembering things such as playing in the mud and eating fresh wheat. But after a year, he was sent home. On the boat home, the Navy officer in charge of taking care of him paid him very little attention. Once Wang Yu departed from the boat, he saw his dad, who was dressed in an identical Navy officer uniform, and thought that the two sailors were the same person. So he wondered why his dad ignored him on the trip back, never connecting the dots to high school. His inability to recognize that the sailor in the boat was not his father was a byproduct of being away from his father for so long. Due to the poverty that overwhelmed China during the Cultural Revolution, Wang Yu's family often lived with other families, renting out 1 or 2 rooms in a 4-room home when he was younger. The most cramped being his family of 4 having 1 room and sharing 1 bathroom and kitchen with 4 other families. Although Wang Yu's family was poor compared to Western standards, most people in China were poor, making Wang Yu's family actually a little above average. His dad was in the Navy, working at the Navy school, so the family was allowed to live on campus at the Navy school. Starting in 1st grade at the ripe old age of 8, Wang Yu went to his local elementary school. As a student, he worked hard, being able to test into the best local middle school and often doing math practice books on his own. In 7th grade, he was able to go to one of the first coding classes for students in China, which recruited the best few math students from each city in its surrounding area. The availability of the coding class was only made possible by Deng Xiaoping's takeover of China, reopening China to the rest of the world and the improved technologies of the Western world. Although in high school he was not always the best student, he was usually at the top of his class, and in the National College entrance exam, he was able to get into Tsinghua University for microelectronics. Tsinghua University is one of China's most prestigious engineering schools and would pave the way for Wang Yu's move to the U.S. Having participated in previous student protests, Wang Yu almost participated in the Tiananmen Square shooting incident. But by sheer luck, he had been too tired after returning from his home in Dalian. Thankfully, this shooting did not hurt Wang Yu personally, as the main leaders of the protests had been students from the nearby Peking University. After 5 years of college, he worked in China for a while, where he met his future mother-in-law, before moving to Singapore for both work and the National University of Singapore for microelectronics for graduate school. As a way to improve his career, he moved to the United States in 1999 at age 29. Eventually, my dad decided to go to the University of Illinois for both education and better potential jobs in his field. His plane flight to Illinois was a long one. He started in Singapore, going to China to inform his parents of his decision to leave, then returning to Singapore to resign from his current job, and then having a layover in Japan, Detroit, and then finally reaching the college town of urban Champaign, Illinois. Much like his flight itinerary, his doctorate program was hectic, having to get his class organized and settle into his living conditions almost immediately. And with a rigorous course load, he could not afford to take very many breaks, even in the face of traditional Chinese holidays. There was no one to drive with Wang Yu while he had a learner's permit, and having bought a car for 2 weeks without driving it, he could not wait and went driving at night. But when he was caught by the police, since he was driving in curves like a drunkard, he thought he was going to jail. Another cultural difference was in driving lanes, as Wang Yu had lived in Singapore before going to America and would occasionally drive in the wrong lane. He also felt isolated when all his classmates would return home for Christmas break and left very few people on campus. But during Chinese New Year, Wang Yu was unable to return to his family and celebrate. Eventually, Wang Yu found a job, terminating his doctorate degree in favor of graduating with a master's degree, going to the East Coast to reunite with his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, and the ocean. After Wang Yu's wife finished graduate school, she found a job on the West Coast and, with me, their daughter, moved to San Diego and within a year found their way to Orange County. Although I already knew most of this information, finding out the small details were really nice, and my view in relationship with my dad has stayed positive and strong. I've also learned that my dad is brave to face the loneliness of immigrating alone, earning more of my respect, especially with the lack of Chinese holidays. Personally, if I didn't celebrate the Lunar Festival by eating mooncakes, I would have become so sad. And no matter how much one prepares for a new place, there are always cultural differences that must be overcome. Through this project, I realized that grandparents are much more important and prominent role in family life in China than in the U.S. Being one hand brought up by my own grandma, seeing my dad also being raised by his grandparents to a certain degree, and then seeing the aloof role of grandparents in the United States, I realized that the filial piety in China was prominent, despite the havoc wreaked on Confucian values during the Cultural Revolution.